draft season is upon us. Are you considering switching to an IDP league? Have you put $20 in your commissioner's hand to say, please switch to an IDP league? Because kickers and defensive originations, if you will, or whatever, designations suck. Let's teach the newbies, well, maybe newbies. We have a couple guys joining us as we talk about how you can start an IDP league by mocking it out.
You know, I got to say, of all the smooth intros you've ever had, that might have been the smoothest one. I got to be honest with you.
I really feel comfortable when I have Kurt with me. That's Kurt Brown from at Ernie Pantuso on the old Twitter machine, or X machine. He has a different name on the other X machine, but we won't go into exactly what that one is. I'm sure it has something to do with the Raiders and Jamarcus Russell. We'll get there.
Hey,
Also
don't
joining
leave out Darius Hayward Bay.
Oh, I will not. I will not.
Go Terps.
Fastest man alive.
Quickest man in, and one of the fastest exits out of the league as well. Not as fast as Jamarcus, but what we won't be doing is drafting Jamarcus Russell, or probably not Darius Hayward Bay. You never know. Is Ken in the mock draft with us?
No, but he's more prone to going after somebody a la Devonta Freeman, who's been out of the league for a few years.
Yes. I'm pretty sure that there's not too far separation, but I'm Nate. Jorge's joining me as always at Shoot the Gap. If you are jumping in and you want to comment on the mock draft, if you're partaking in the mock draft and you have questions about, well, this specific, how to get started an IDP league, what questions you may have, jump over to the YouTube page. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell every time you want to see our pretty faces coming on. But what we have is, first of all, a question by our friend Craig, or a person we don't know. Hi, fellas. First-time caller, long-time listener. Got a question for y'all. What exactly is IDP? Jorge, would you like to take that one?
Sure. So it stands for individual defensive player or position, depending on how you look at it. Basically, you know, just like on offense, we look at wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, quarterbacks. We look at the individual positions on defense. You know, places like Sleeper, Yahoo, NFL, they follow a traditional 3 designation setting, where they break up these individual positions by defensive lineman, linebacker, defensive back. Places like MFL and ESPN, they use a 5 position designation where it has defensive tackle, defensive end, linebacker, cornerback, safety. So depending on your platform that you're using, you definitely have a lot of options to select these individual defensive players.
In other words, you know what? It's just another way to play the game of fantasy football. Kurt, Jeremy, I didn't introduce you. I'm sorry. Jeremy, one of the beginning, what's
OGs,
the OGs. I think that's a very fair way of saying that to the Fantasy and Frames family. If you were at the Fantasy Expo, you saw Jeremy all over the place at the booth, hanging out with us. You could probably hear his voice masked by Carrie's, but assume that was not his voice. That was actually Carrie talking, almost ventriloquist style. So if Jeremy said anything offensive, it probably was Carrie, and mostly Jeremy as well. So how many leagues have you played in, Jeremy? IDP, what would you say? Over, under, or years? Let's go over, under years. Over, under 6 years of IDP.
I am actually an over on that. Back when ESPN was first foray into IDP, and Jorge and I were in a league way back when it almost kind of didn't matter who you drafted for IDP. It was pretty nerfed. It wasn't really fun, and I didn't have a lot of fun with it until probably I'd say maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I feel like it started to pick up. People really put more attention to it, and I don't know. I found it to be a really interesting part of the game, like rooting for both sides of the ball.
Yeah, you know, one way to make it fun is winning your very first ever IDP league, a la Kurt Brown's story. Hey, what's your origin story for IDP, Kurt?
Yeah, this is my 4th year of playing IDP now, and I love it. Got started with you guys in that Dynasty IDP league, which, I mean, really jumping into the deep end of the pool there. And, really didn't have a whole lot of clue of what I was doing. learned, a little bit more as we've, progressed. And I love it. It's so much fun. Kind of like Jeremy said, it's great. You have interest in both sides of the ball when you're watching the game. It's been a lot of fun. I look forward to getting involved more and more every year now.
Kurt, do you think that playing IDP has helped you on the offensive side of the game as well?
Oh God, I need a lot of help on the offensive side of the ball. So, yeah, because I think I pay attention a little bit more and have a little bit better understanding of certain things that I look for and ways to plan for it. So I think it has. I just pay a lot more attention now, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the case for most of us. And it's nice to turn on a game at any given point. If you're a degenerate like the four of us, at any specific game from Thursday through Monday night, it's hard to envision you don't have at least one piece from something going on. If it's a safety, right? Just one added element to completely ignore your family for the rest of the Sunday, Monday, Thursday, the occasional Saturday. And I won't put words in your all's mouth, but
you're not far off. You're not far off.
If nothing else, it gives you that without feeling like, how do I keep caring about games I probably don't have players in without drafting 8 wide receivers that I need to start 7 wide receivers at IDP.
There you go. I like it. Like I said, I'm getting ready to, get rid of defense and kickers, and that's not a knock against those two. There's a spot for those positions. I get it.
There's really not.
There's really not.
Yeah,
no. Exactly. Words expressed by Kurt Brown and not those of fantasyandframes.com. But
some people out there care, Kurt. Some people out there, not me, but some people out there.
Yeah.
Well, so what we have done for tonight's mock draft is we've gathered not all 12. We have 8 of our friends joining us, from Melissa, who's in the first spot. Jorge, you're in the second spot. We have a little computer in the third. Jeremy's out of the fourth. Kurt, you're in the fifth. You two should have a good little battle back and forth. I think that's Ken in the sixth spot. Our friend Sean is in the 8th spot. And then I am rounding out of the 12th so that we have a little break point in there. And what we will do is it's a mixed IDP and offense, 1 quarterback, 2 receivers, or 2 running backs, 3 receivers, your tight end, a couple flex spots. And then on the IDP side, we'll have 3 defensive line, 3 linebackers, 3 defensive backs. And then we'll have some bench spots as well, so that it'll give us an idea to not dig too deep, if you will. Craig, we will not have punters quite yet. If we did, I would say that if we had an all-time punter, I would take Ray Guy from Kurt's Oakland Raiders at the time. I know they're not Las Vegas at the time. I have a signed 8x10 of Ray Guy right around the corner back there. And that, check that off your bingo card for what Nate might say in tonight's episode. And I think without further ado, I think we can get started. And again, if you're listening or watching, jump over to YouTube. If you have questions, if you're a first-time IDP participant or a long time, ask these guys whatever questions you may. And Jorge, if you will, would you share the sleeper screen, or do you want me to do that?
I do not have it up, so if you have it up, if not, I can go on and do it. What is it? What do you?
No, I can do it right here. Exactly.
All right.
I think that, oh crap, this is a bad sign when I have 3 different sleeper screens up. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these off here. Always another good sign of a degenerate is when you have too many fantasy screens up at once. But Kurt, let me ask you a question before we get started. Do you prefer the mix, or do you prefer the IDP only if you had your say in one only?
I like the mix. I think for redraft, for year to year, I like the mix, but I really like the dynasty that we're in for IDP only, because that's something entirely different. It doesn't take a whole lot, of monitoring to be able to participate in that, and I like that aspect of. But I like the mixed leagues for the redraft year to year.
Yeah, I guess, and we'll talk about strategy as we go along. I'm gonna go ahead and start the draft right now. And we'll get started. Melissa will be the first pick. Obviously, I think the first couple rounds, as we know, will be and everybody sees the screen fairly well, correct?
Yep.
All right, perfect. Gotcha. For those listening at home, you don't get to see the screen. I will just, wonderfully explain it to you in vivid detail.
Do you mind if I give people a little bit of background about drafting IDPs on Sleeper before we get going and wait for Melissa's pick here?
Or you can do whatever you want.
So Jeremy and I are in a couple leagues together that have IDP, and it drives us absolutely bonkers because we're both co-commissioners of a lot of these leagues. And Sleeper, for whatever reason, when you sign up, when you create your league and you make it an IDP league, the ADP for an IDP league, say that 3 times fast, is that of a super flex. So those who are participating in the draft right now, you may notice that quarterbacks are bumped up higher than they would be if it was a PPR, half PPR, non-PPR type of league. So that's something for all of you at home who are on Sleeper. Keep that in mind, that it's not telling you, oh, well, you better draft quarterbacks higher because you're in an IDP league. It's like, no, it's because it's using super flex settings, which we've reached out ad nauseum to Sleeper, but, we all know where their stance is with that. So just keep that in mind during the draft. If you see folks who are watching over on YouTube or Twitter, on Facebook, if you see quarterbacks going a little bit early, maybe by the auto draft teams, just know that that's a product of the whole Superflex ADP, not necessarily what we would endorse you doing during your drafts.
I would also encourage those who didn't know that or just want to have a reason to be obnoxious, go at Sleeper. Tell them to fix this, because it's one of those things I think that inhibits some people from doing IDP, because they're like, well, what if I miss a pick? All of a sudden I have 2 quarterbacks in 6 rounds or 8 rounds. And they're like, that's not what I wanted to do. So it's unfortunate, but I think you should try it. Just all the more reason to make sure you're in your draft, being attentive. Don't go on all the draft. Don't be that person.
Yeah, and I probably could have given a little heads up. So I paused the draft right now, just giving her a chance to jump in, because I know she was very excited to partake in this, considering she is in a league with me. It's the FF7s league, where she drafted against a lot of, it's a 14-team mixed IDP offense league that is, in our specific league, I think Bob Harris was in there. I think Mike Dempsey was in. I would say me, but that doesn't mean anything. Her, and then numerous others. And she had the first spot in that. She has the first spot in this. And, it's after the draft. Obviously, this would have been helpful, prior, but it sounds like they are a sleeper at the wheel, Fry. Oh, Craig, I tell you, the puns are
cheers, Craig.
Amazing every week. That's what we look forward to. Kurt, if there's any reason for you to jump to watch this every week, you will get at least 1 or 2 puns that you probably can use on Benjamin. Maybe, I don't know if you'd understand sleeper ADP for IDP necessarily yet, but
I'm failing as a parent if he's not. Yeah.
the bar's not real high. Let's be honest. We don't try to set it too far. So I hate to start it and give Melissa Mahomes, but then again, you know what? That's not a bad thing, because what is this weekend? This weekend is home league drafts, where if we see anything crazy happen, that's some of the stuff that does. And so not a bad move. And Jorge, it'll give you a chance to jump on and take full advantage of maybe who your number 1 pick would be, but
Sam Howell.
There you go.
There you
Absolutely.
Go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Actually, I can set a player for her.
Do the consensus one that everybody wants.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's do Justin Jefferson. Why not? Let's start off with Justin. I think, Kurt, is Justin Jefferson your
should
one?
not go to Jorge.
Yes, true.
Love it. All right, I'm going to go here, and I'm going to take a running back that I'm pretty high on, is Austin Eckler. I'm going to forego CMC and go Austin Eckler here.
It's interesting. Yeah. Go ahead.
Maybe Nate, while we're kind of going through, and I know we've got another computer slot here, and I'll make my pick. Like, what, for those that haven't done IDP, I think people have a good sense of, okay, I know what my options are on offense. I got 1 quarterback, usually 2 wide receivers, or maybe 3, 2 running backs, probably a flex, maybe 2, and a tight end. What should people expect if they want to try IDP a little or a lot? Like, what do people normally do in terms of spots for IDP or roster spots?
So, you actually were talking to some people at the expo, and you are on the clock. I set it down to 60 seconds to make best use of this. But that's a great question, because I would ask some of the newer people to say, hey, do you want to jump in, as Kurt did, into a dynasty, 15-person IDP? And 99% of the people will say no. The majority want small enough to get acclimated. You were given the recommendation of replacing your defensive spot with just one IDP. And I didn't want to say I don't like that, because I think that everybody's entitled to play in exactly, what fits their needs. It takes luck. Luck adds a little too much into the case with one. But if you give me, do 6. I think 2, 2, and 2 is a great way that you're getting 72 players. If you look at the board for most people, I think 72 is not a far enough stretch down the clock or down the ADP that you won't recognize the names, because I think that's what people want is familiarity.
Yeah.
And they don't want to see Aziz Ojolari is not the name that you want to have to be debating between that and Baron Browning or something way down the list. You want to know, oh yeah, I know who Fred Warner is. That's not 60, but you get the idea. And so I'll let you guys talk amongst yourselves as I make my pick. And I'll even probably.
Yeah. So to piggyback off of what Nate was just saying, for me, I come from the standpoint of like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to make it worthwhile. Right. So I'm somebody who probably would not start a league or jump into it where it's just one IDP, because you got to take in a lot of things into consideration. Maybe the league settings that you're in, which again, we always talk about, and I know it's super redundant this time of year, but you still need to hear it. Know your league settings.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe your IDP settings don't give you that many points for different plays, right? So Jeremy, you and I have been in leagues where Bobby Wagner at the pinnacle of his career, which is still going strong, on a 15 total tackle week, got you 6 points. What the hell? What's the point, right? You might as well you could have just left somebody in there, a wide receiver 4 in your flex spot and be done with it. So for me, I'm all about preaching, make it worthwhile. So whether it's having 2 or 3 per position, meaning defensive lineman, linebacker, defensive back, that's how I would do it, especially if my scoring settings are lower. But even if they're higher, then that's even better, because, with the shift towards half PPR and PPR points, the offensive totals now and total points are increasing even more so. So you might as well just have that balance with your IDP by having more players on your roster. For me, that makes it more fun. If you just have one, like I said, it kind of it gives me the whole, like, what's the point, thing with it.
Yeah, it decreases the, I don't want to say skill, because everybody wants to utilize skill in that. I mean, I think any of us are competitive enough. We don't want to win by just randomly getting. If that was the case, we just auto draft every league we're ever in, if we didn't want to actually pick our players. Kurt, as the getting into the league, if it was starting, it's hard to go back 4 years now because you're so set in the IDP ways, if you will. Did you prefer with an offense to have the 6 setting? What would you recommend to a person, say some of our friends that are jumping into IDP, that your persuasive ways, what would be your encouraging words to say some of our leagues that we do if we want to switch?
Yeah, I like the 6 to start out, because like you said earlier, you're not getting into where you don't know who these players are that you're drafting, and so that helps. It's still relatively familiar names of the people you're drafting, and one just like isn't enough. Like, no one's ever gone to a bar and had one beer. 6 is a reasonable number. So there's Jeremy, my first snipe of me right there. I was waiting for Pollard to come back.
Great landing spot for Pollard in the third. Obviously, that because of the quarterbacks being there, him lasting into it. But again, home leagues, that at pick, around 29, that's not crazy, or 20, to see Pollard fall that far in a home league.
Yeah. And so now, knowing this, I mean, for me, you can take a risk here and hope he gets traded, but
yeah, exactly. I think that the value there is spot on, because the ceiling is extremely high. This league, as we kind of joked about, is free. You don't have to, but I mean, you're not reaching too far. Josh Jacobs or Jonathan Taylor, if you were given the choice between the two there, for you, Kurt.
That's a good question. I think Taylor, because I think somebody will reach up and put out a trade. But I mean, I think there's a higher potential of him getting traded.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, Jacobs, who knows? Is injured as he's been, and that, I mean, does he want? I mean, he's often hurt. I mean, does he want to risk it and go out there and play again? I think there's a higher likelihood of him sitting out versus Pollard or Taylor getting traded. So I mean, that's just a totally uneducated guess on my part.
We're all uneducated. None of us have a clue because we have to go by what Jim Irsay says, and there's nothing educating about that lunatic teaching us anything.
Well, apparently there's a report that just came out on one of the Twitter notifications here is that the Dolphins submitted an offer, but the Colts turned it down, but they're still in negotiations.
Yeah. So. I'm never quite certain to take, like, at this point with 16 days to go, you would assume that the teams would be a little more forthright and say, let's get something going. But the beat writers, they even, is their goal to be clicky and get the clicks they want? Or is that, oh man, I'm sorry, I'm rambling while I'm on the clock. And this is
good. While you're focusing on your draft pick, let me set the stage here for you for a question once you're done.
Yeah.
We haven't had, Michael Parsons first IDP off the board. And I was going to say, before IDP goes off the board here, as maybe for those of you who don't know, there's no unified standardized scoring for IDP. And trust me, that's been discussed ad nauseum. There probably never will be, but it also gives you a lot of creative freedom, right? To set up how you set up your league. For the sake of this beginner IDP draft, Nate, what are our thoughts? Are we doing something that's a balanced scoring where you find more comparable plays between offensive and defensive players? Are we doing something, or even amongst the different defensive positions? Are we doing something that's more tackle heavy, more big play? What are your thoughts here for this draft?
I think if you're trying to grab the attention of a new player, the last thing we want to do is exactly what you and Jeremy were discussing earlier, is make it, it's a half a point for a tackle, 2/3 of a point for, a sack. And so that doesn't necessarily indicate which style of scoring. What Jorge is referring to is that there can be tackle heavy scoring where the majority of the points are based on tackles, and there's not as much benefit to the sack or the passes defense or the quarterback hits or some of the other scoring metrics. But I want to see the scores up a little bit, especially for some of the defensive linemen. And I want sacks to maybe be worth, so maybe more of a big play scoring. I think it widens the player pool. I think we've already seen that by a lot of the true position designation. And what I mean by that is they've made the outside linebackers, instead of being just a linebacker in a 3-4 defense. So for the newer players, a lot of defensive position changes across the NFL. They are changing just the way, if you go into Google, what are NFL defenses, and you find the results from 2012, they're going to say the 4-3 or the 3-4, meaning how many people, 4 across and then 3 behind them, or 3 and then 4 behind them. Those days are gone. And so are the same as far as position eligibility and scoring. And so the defensive line amount of players in that grouping is widened, and the amount of quality linebackers has shortened. And I think that if you make the sacks a little heavier, increase some of the scoring for like the secondary players, it allows more names that are viable, that bring joy to you when you see your player score 9 or 10 points versus the 2 or 3 or 6. We want what do you say, Jorge? And this would be another question, is comparisons between positions. So for instance, Micah Parsons.
Right.
Micah Parsons as the, defensive lineman 1, maybe the LB, I don't know. He's probably a low end LB1 as far as the linebackers go, but he's got dual eligibility. Kurt, if you were trying to compare Micah Parsons to another position, would you want him to be equal to a wide receiver 1, a running back 1, or do you want them to be on par with, say, quarterbacks?
Quarterback, I think, is too high.
Okay, fair enough. Me too.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to pick here real quick.
Oh, yeah. No.
Here we go.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, that's tough to say. I think it also depends on the scoring in the league too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest with you. That's one of the tough questions is how do you value that defensive side of the ball? Like what's the points that are used? That's always one of the tricky things when getting into it, and like how to balance that, because understanding what the points are for defense kind of helps dictate where you should take them in a draft.
Exactly right.
Yeah, because
Exactly.
I mean, if their value's relatively low, then there's no need to reach for anybody on defense. Their value's high, then like here, jump up, grab a Parsons, grab a Watt, grab a Roquan Smith kind of player. So that's the thing. Like you guys have said earlier, understand your league settings, know what the points are, and I think that'll help dictate when and where to take some of those defensive players.
I agree.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the scoring settings, and this is for IDP, I find know your league more than anything, because
Boom.
you will have leagues where, Jorge and I have been in leagues where we love IDP. Like Jorge and I love sitting on those defensive players, but we know we can wait till round 8, 9, before some of the top ones go off the board, and you can be in that run. And some of our leagues have gotten smart. I remember one of our big home leagues, our league of record, if you will. I think that was probably the strategy that we took a few years ago. But, I want to say last year, I think TJ Watt went in round 3, maybe. So people start getting wise. They realize that a big day for a defensive player can win you your week. And that's how I think it should be personally. I like having a bit of inflated scoring. I was scared of it at first because I thought, it's so random, it feels like it's not really predictable, but it is to some degree. It's as predictable as, what is your wide receiver actually going to score a touchdown this week? The odds are, if it's Tyreek Hill, probably pretty high. What are the odds that TJ Watt gets 1.5 sacks a week? Probably pretty high, and they should be rewarded for that. Those are game-changing plays, and they should help you win your week.
And this is the question. This is the one. This is where, if I want to get the hook set into a person from an IDP standpoint, I'm gonna let Kurt make his pick because I want to get his opinion, and as well as yours, Jeremy. Jorge, yours too. Don't let me fool you. You have a chance to choose your destiny, if you will, for a victory on Monday night against your opponent. Would you rather have your running back rush it in from the 1-yard line, or would you rather have your defensive end sack the opposing quarterback to finish the game and win your own fantasy matchup? Kurt?
Oh, good question. Maybe the defensive player, because there's less chance of that getting called back, like a knee going down for the running back goes in the end zone kind of thing. A lot of if there's no flag on the play, it's pretty certain that's a sack and that's a game over kind of thing.
Different approach. I see. I was just going for pure excitement, like
guttural
enjoyment.
Many times, Nate. I can't go through any more.
That's a man scarred right there.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. That's life lessons that we've all learned, unfortunately. For you 20-year-olds listening right there, don't worry, give it time. You will eventually be scarred and jaded like us and have no excitement in life, and we just get through. But let's go, and I want to talk about Melissa's draft so far because she just took her first IDP spot, and it was in the 7th round. She got ahead. If you ask me, I talked about this earlier, guys. Linebackers in a lot of IDP scoring they're your running backs. They're the guys that we historically have said they're the ones that we want to take first. They're the meat and potatoes of your IDP roster, but they're also narrowing in scope by this true position designation. If you play in that, there's so many different, that's why it's like speaking sometimes in just to vast spaces. I could be talking to 20 different people and there's 19 different scoring formats that it doesn't affect them as much, but you don't want to be caught on the back end of that linebacker, I would say, run. And what we're seeing is that we're getting really close right there. Teams like Team 7, where they go Roquan and Aluakon. Jorge, is that a strategy of yours sometimes in IDP, is to load up at one specific position and focus on that? Or do you like to diversify your IDP positions?
So it depends on where other IDPs have gone. So, for example, I want, one of my strategies in IDP leagues is if I'm going to load up, I want to make sure that on linebackers, that is, I want to make sure that enough of the elite defensive linemen have gone off the board. That way I'm not reaching for them, in which case at that point, boom, I'll load up on these top linebackers. But if I'm noticing conversely that, a bunch of these linebackers have gone off the board, again, it's the whole zig and zag thing when it comes to drafting in fantasy football. I'd rather get these few and far between elite defensive linemen and they'll get it, and then go in my drafts later on. And Jeremy, you brought up a very good point. You can find tons of value at the linebacker position. Well, Nate, you bring up also a good point that because of true position designations, you're losing some of these outside linebacker that counted as linebackers to begin with. But at the same time, were you really drafting them as your linebackers, to begin with, or were they kind of left on the the waiver wire, so to speak, for lack of a better term? So there is value to be found in IDP, but it's about reading the board also as you're going.
That's probably one of the truest statements you could possibly make, is that when we talk about value of where they should go, I want to say it's relevant, but I also want to say it's irrelevant in that if no one starts the IDP trend, you definitely don't want to be the first. Let's say that with Micah Parsons at team 10 in the 4th round, if that was the first IDP selection and there wasn't another choice taken for 4 or 5 more rounds, I don't want to say it's a wasted pick, but your opportunity cost is so much different than if everybody had been taken like that. Like it did happen. It started kind of that proverbial run a little bit, maybe the next round. But what we saw is then a handful of IDP options off the board. So, Parsons started it. And then we see TJ Watt, Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa, by the way, holding out. Is anybody, show of hands, concerned with Nick Bosa actually not reporting to the team, or do you think this is just simply posturing?
Posturing 100%.
Jeremy?
Yeah, same.
Kurt?
Yeah, I don't think he wants to do training camp.
Smart move. I don't blame him. And when you're Nick Bosa, you shouldn't have to do training camp. Screw that. Roquan Smith is the next IDP name, drafted by Team 7. And then it goes around. I took Nick Bolton because I'm a homer, and I just love Nick Bolton anyway. And if I'm going to get one of my top 3 linebackers, him, Roquan, or Aluakon, I'll always settle for having my own, favorite player or favorite team, followed by Aluakon. And then after Devin White, the aforementioned, with Max Crosby, it gets to Kurt U at Derwin James. There is no safety. So we've talked ad nauseum about the idea of defensive backs being the position. If you're new to IDP, if there's a position you can wait on, I think that's a fair question to ask. A lot of people want to know is, where do you prioritize defensive back? And a lot of people put defensive back as that you can wait, because there is a lot of volatility in the position. It is a deep position. There's variable scorings in that are interceptions worth more, passes defense. But if there's one player that bucks the trend of volatility, and that is Derwin James. And I will say that where you got him, Kurt, especially as your number 1 IDP option, you got maybe the easiest overall at his position to be the number 1 option.
Yeah, I wanted a tier 1 guy. I'd missed it on the D-line and the linebacker. I want a tier 1 guy on my team. And so even if it is a little bit of a reach there, I've got him, and then I can kind of fill in the rest, was my thinking.
I don't think it's a reach. I think that it's a spot exactly where you should take him. And I think you follow that up by Bobby Okereke, who is I think he's in a tier, that tier 2 amongst linebackers, right, Jorge?
Oh, absolutely. With the role he should have next to Micah McFadden. We're assuming Micah McFadden, given the whole trade today of Isaiah Simmons to the Giants, Okereke should eat in New York this year. He definitely has linebacker 1 value written all over him in terms of opportunity. Going back to Derwin James, it's one of those, again, it's, Nate, you brought up the whole thing about punting the position just because of the volatility. But if, like you said, also, if there was one person you could count on in defensive back, it is Derwin James, so he definitely has the tackle upside. He plays really close to the line of scrimmage. Mm-hmm. These are all qualities that you want of your safeties, of your defensive backs, which, if I'm looking down the ADP, and let me just kind of glance over this for a second, we are very pro, safeties that play in the box close to the line of scrimmage because they help out in run support. They may blitz the quarterback. They have the opportunity for these big plays that we're talking about, versus a cornerback like on the ADP, Sauce Gardner, just went off the board right after you selected Brian Burns, Nate, just now. Cornerbacks, especially these elite names at the cornerback position, these shutdown corners, you have to ask yourself, are those the players you want on your IDP roster? The answer Short answer, no. Why? Long answer, because think about it. If you are a shutdown cornerback and if you were a quarterback on the opposing team, are you throwing the ball to that shutdown corner that could probably pick you off or shut down your wide receiver? Or are you throwing it to the other side where that guy is not as good? You're probably throwing it to the other side where that's not as good. And so what does that do? It basically prevents you from getting any points from that shutdown corner. So there is a game within IDP, especially in defensive backs. But again, going back, Kurt, to your selection of Derwin James, again, the tackle upside is there, and definitely one of the safer picks at defensive back this year.
Yeah, and like Mr. Scampers said, hello, Mr. Scampers, they will pay Bosa. They would be foolish not to. But as we've learned with the Trey Lance debacle, San Francisco's not perfect. How in the world they're this good with that bad of a move is either a testament to how cunning they can be. I talked myself into a corner. I don't even know.
Yeah, it makes you wonder who's in control of drafting in the early part of the draft and who's the one calling the shots in the later rounds of the draft. Because it almost seems like there's two separate people. It's like either Shanahan's doing early or he's doing late in the draft. But it's to piggyback on what you just said, it is amazing that they were one game away from the Super Bowl last year. They were one game away from the Super Bowl a couple seasons ago. So it's what boggles my mind is that nothing is going to happen from the front office perspective. Like neither John Lynch or Shanahan are going to face any negative outcome from the owner or whatever, because they made 10-year contracts for both of these guys, so they're not going anywhere anytime soon, and they are winning. Had they not been winning, that's a different story, right?
Yeah, no, and that's always the thing. Winning always soothes a lot of the bumps and bruises that we see when it comes to some bad draft spots. But in a good draft spot so far, Kurt, I will say that a roundup so far of your team out of the 5 spot, you get the luxury of Christian McCaffrey, talking about the 49ers, with Stephon Diggs. Yeah, it really, what it does is at the 3rd pick with Jonathan Taylor, it eases that concern that if Jonathan Taylor reaches his ceiling and he signs even with the Colts and or whoever else it is, Colts playing tonight didn't look terrible. Anthony Richardson looked like he was able to move the ball against the 2nd and 3rd string Eagles defense, which is fine. But if he returns to even just 90% of what he was a couple of years back, you have the best running back tandem I think you could possibly put together. Sorry, Jeremy, I think yours of Pollard, Joe Mixon, and the ascending Javonte Williams, not too bad. Receiving core, Stephon Diggs, Christian Watson, very polarizing player, of course. I think that he has the opportunity to be just dynamic this year. Amari Cooper, and then you waited, luckily, until the 6th round, and you still get Justin Herbert after all the quarterback runs early, which is incredible because, the value there. This is where IDP is kind of nice. It pushes some of those other guys down a little bit too. And you were still able to get the LB1, a top 12 linebacker in Okiriki, a top 12 defensive lineman in Aiden Hutchinson, and then you get to pair up Justin Herbert with Mike Williams, who, if healthy for a full season, is extremely dangerous. And then you go and pick up your second linebacker, and who I have in my top 15 in Cole Holcomb, who at Pittsburgh should be a tackle machine. Jorge, I think that phrase is I don't want to say tagged by you because somebody else would probably disagree, but you have made that a focal point of your IDP, I would say.
So do you want to know a quick side note on where that actually came from?
Sure.
Ken Sonnenberg and I, back in 2018, we were doing a show. We were talking about IDPs, and we were talking about Demario Davis when he left the Jets to go to New Orleans, and how his final season with the Jets, he tallied 120 plus tackles. He was one of the highest volume tacklers in all of football. He goes to the Saints, and the next day on Twitter, I tweeted at him, and I just put the hashtag tackle machine, and he liked and retweeted my tweet. And so ever since then, I've always considered Demario Davis the quote unquote hashtag tackle machine. But needless to say, there are plenty of other options to use that hashtag for.
Yes, hashtags are the pound signs on the old rotary phones for us old heads that don't know exactly what that is. It is the Kurt, in case you were wondering, that is
Oh,
what
come
that.
on.
No,
Appreciate it.
Kurt, hey, we're in the same boat.
Oh
this
yeah.
he knows he's ready to draft. I would say. So, what are you thinking here, Kurt? Let me ask you, pick your brain a little bit, Jeremy. After Kurt, I want to hear what you're kind of thinking going into it.
Man, I really don't know right here.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I'm back and forth between D line and linebacker. Let's see here. Yeah, it's a tough call. You know what? It might be a reach, and I think he's going to play. So
no such thing. See, and I love to see. As Jeremy falls out of his chair, the pick was Chris Jones, the disgruntled defensive tackle for my Kansas City Chiefs, who has said on social media that he's willing to sit out until week 8. I don't buy it. I don't think the Chiefs would be stupid enough to not get something done, a la what Kurt said about Nick Bosa. Maybe this is just also Chris Jones saying, man, I played, 22 games last year, 21 the year before, 22 the year before that. And maybe man's just tired. He's tired. He just wants to relax, just get some money, get paid, and then go to the Super Bowl again. That would be the hope, at least for me. I see that followed up by Tyler Lockett. Alex Highsmith. Yeah, that's an interesting name. So for the IDP guys out there, or for the IDP newbies, one of the things that, Jorge, I think we might get a little deep in the weeds here. I don't want to get too deep, so corral me back in if I do. It's easy to look at offensive statistics and say, and Melissa, this is for you when you're doing yours as well, and everybody else listening. We all want to go in and do the research and say, all right, I want to look at receptions for the offensive side, rushing yards, touchdowns, etc. The defensive side, people want to go in, they just want to select, sort by sacks, sort by tackles. One thing to pay attention to is sometimes those numbers are a little misleading because they can be outliers. And I think Alex Highsmith is one of those indicators that you're going to find polarizing, that some people are in agreement that his, sack totals over the last couple of years are right on par with his ability. Others will say that it's a hyperinflated sack to pressure ratio. Up and back and
just return the favor.
And return the favor. Jordan Brooks looks to be healthy for week 1, which could be a huge steal in the 13th round. LB1, 2 years ago before the injury. So very good pick. But go back to
160 mixed combination, but it was a huge number.
He's a beast, and
would be a hashtag tackle machine if he retweeted us.
He would, yes, it would be Jordan Brooks. But now with having Bobby Wagner there, those two combined might eat a little bit, but who cares? Those two are they're both capable of LB1 seasons. It's nice to see what is going on with modern medicine right now. So Javonte, you have the Javonte and Jordan Brooks, who if this draft was 6 months ago, you could have both gotten 6 rounds later for each one of them. And they're continuing to rise from the early reports. Inversely, Samaje Perine was about 4 rounds earlier than this a while back because of the unknown of Javonte Williams. Thank you. Sorry, it's my turn to pick. And
Jorge, you're getting Javonte's surgeon, right? That's the plan.
I hope the person working on my knee is Javonte's surgeon. But it's interesting. You talk about what's going on with modern medicine. The answer is actually quite simple. Adrian Peterson gave some of his DNA to all the doctors in the world.
Smart move.
Because up until a few years ago, he was the only person a year after suffering an ACL injury came back and won MVP. And he thought, how can I make some side money now that I'm not playing in the NFL anymore? Although probably he still could, to be honest with you, just because he's Adrian freaking Peterson. And he's now floating on even more cash because now all the doctors are paying him for his DNA. So
yeah, Jamal Charles was another one who came back pretty impressively, I would say. So now my spot here's up. And I got to tell you, so a couple of my picks. One, Jorge, I know you would love my Matthew Judon pick. Very underrated player. Some of these guys, again, that aren't the big names when you're playing in some of the IDP leagues that you're starting is you just don't necessarily recognize all of them. But I can tell you, Judon is very underrated, great player, and he's easily identifiable because he wears red sleeves. So you can pick out which player on your team. Nick Fury had Adrian Peterson's DNA in a vial with the other Avengers. Yes, if there was an Avenger, Adrian Peterson would be the closest to fitting that mold, or maybe Aaron Donald, DK Metcalf.
All that.
You know what? With that pick there, Nate, I think something that I'm a big proponent of finding guys like a TJ Watt or Hassan Reddick, your dual position. I took Jeremy Chin earlier in there. Gives you that little bit of flexibility, particularly as bye weeks come up. Also, you can get some really good value, obviously, with TJ Watt being able to slot in a lineman can give you some pretty high upside. The one thing that I always forget until I'm at this point in the draft is just this is a nuts and bolts. Remember, everyone, Sleeper doesn't know that you want to put TJ Watt in your defensive lineman spot. And it's showing you, like it shows me, hey, you've got one defensive lineman drafted and 3 linebackers. And you have to do that mental math, be like, oh, wait, do I really? Who should I be looking? So remember who your team is, remember what you're slotting. Particularly, this is not something you have to deal with on the offensive side of the ball unless you're drafting Taysom Hill, and that's about it. Yeah.
That's another good little trick too, is so going into these drafts, if there's a little draft strategery that I do, I always try to pull up the league that or the site that I'm drafting on. Jorge and I talked about MFL earlier. It's not the most idealistic for a person trying to get comfortable with that. Yahoo settings, ESPN, NFL, Sleeper. I go in and I start from the bottom of each one of the defensive line, linebacker, defensive back, and maybe the positions. And I search and realize who are some of the outlier guys. And I usually put those guys in my queue. Now, if you do that, please be careful that don't time out and don't put, Justin Ross at the top of your queue because you like him and take him in the first round. I've heard too many situations of that happening, but it saves you from having to scroll quite a bit. And then if you start from this is maybe a little advanced, but it does help for everybody. If you start with the position towards the end, meaning if a person has dual eligibility and they're like Isaiah Simmons, he's defensive back and linebacker. If you start with defensive back, sometimes he is buried in that, but he would be higher up in the linebacker or not even on the other one. Some of the defensive linemen aren't even under the defensive line tag. They're only under the linebacker tag. So you probably do yourself a favor, get on about half an hour early, scroll through, get familiar with those, and then draft, because the last thing you want to do is, be talking like I am and then be up in 30 seconds and have to scroll through real fast and end up taking Isaiah Simmons in the 11th round.
Another thing that for people who are starting out with IDP, and you may be noticing throughout this draft, is you're going to see a lot of offensive players fall down the draft board, and that should not concern you. That is not indicative of saying that, well, their value is just not good. It's you have to look at, for example, like if Micah Parsons has a projected point total of like 390 something, right? And then the next highest offensive player has a projected point total of 2 something. Like you want to go for the upside play there, right? So you don't want to lose points by going for the offensive player just because they just happen to be an offensive player. Go get those high points wherever they are, at whichever position they are at. That's just something to keep in mind there. Nate, you brought up a really good point that, it is good to scroll down the list of your ADP at the various websites that you play IDP in, just so you can find those outliers at the various positions. And it's a great segue because coming out this weekend before you get ready for your IDP drafts, Nate and Corey, one of our new analysts here at Fantasy and Frames, will be helping to cover IDP. They've been digging through multiple platforms, looking for those outliers, helping you realize, hey, Nolan Smith or Bobby Wagner of ADP 999 on Sleeper is somebody that you can find late in your drafts or Yahoo or other platforms. So
you had to say Nolan Smith's name. You caused the CPU to take Nolan Smith.
It's listening to you.
At the top of my queue. Go ahead. Keep going, Jorge.
Okay.
Say another name. I'll tell you the top of my queue. Say another name.
Sure. The Kobe Dean. I don't know. Is that right? Was I right?
Nakobe Dean is on my queue. He's actually one of my three. It's a good spot. That's very interesting. Kurt, Zaven Collins, interesting person, interesting pick, interesting, especially for IDP, and the fact that here's a person who I don't think we know what Arizona's doing at all. There's a good chance. No, I don't either. Yeah. There's a great chance by the end of this week and next week, he is the only player on the team left. They just have a surplus of picks that they will eventually trade away for quarterbacks on other teams that they'll give all the surplus picks they got. They'll trade away for a lesser position. I'm not quite sure. I'm not the GM here, but I think Zaven Collins poses a very interesting value there because none of us really want to believe that he is this edge rusher that they're making him out to be. And yet, worst case scenarios, let's say that they realize that he's probably better off ball. Let's put him back at linebacker. You have a defensive lineman, capable or eligible player, putting up linebacker numbers. So I find Zaven Collins is not the flashiest name sometimes for people, or people want to, shun him and do the cross. But I think it's a sneaky little pick there. Was that kind of going through your mind?
A little bit. With the trade they made this week, freeing up, space and tackles and all that as well. But, when I get this deep in the draft, being relatively new to this and some of these names and, start to, blend together, who do I go with? I'm, just looking at a lot of different sites, trying to pull info. One of the things I fall back on is which teams are bad. Like that Arizona defense is going to be on the field a lot this year.
That's true.
And that's going to lend to a lot because I'll look at that versus maybe look at a team like Tennessee of the past where it's very run heavy. Their offense is on the field an awful lot. That limits the options and the time their defense is on the field. And so I'll look at something like that and be like, you know what, it's this late in the draft. It's worth a shot as I grab another Arizona guy.
Purely a great one, by the way, too. And Jalen Thompson. Again,
well, I was going with Cam Curl, but I knew Jorge was going for his guy there ahead of me. So, a lot of times I'll look at that, which defenses are going to be on the field a lot? Who's going to have a lot of time out there to get tackles, to get sacks, to get interceptions, whatever it may be. And this you're looking at players, how are you trying to decide? That's just one of the things I look at. Look, I don't think Arizona's going to be very good at all. I think defense is going to be out there a lot. And he's going to have a lot of chances. So.
No, and I think that's a great way to look at that. That's the thing that, you pick up, even if it's in just, 3 to 4 years worth of playing. Those are advanced thought processes that go into it, especially, as you play more, you pick up on those tricks and trades because, snaps don't always equal points, but snaps equals opportunity for points. And I get the feeling that you're right. Jalen Thompson and Zaven Collins and Arizona and maybe like my guys, Devon Diablo and Al-Shair, maybe Tennessee and Vegas might be on the field a lot more this year than what we're thinking.
Yeah.
To give a Booger McFarland quote, or to paraphrase Booger McFarland rather, to get points, you need to be on the field.
And that is dynamite. That's why you're the best color man in the business, Jorge.
Thank you.
Dynamite drop. All right. I don't like this.
Dynamite drop.
Dynamite drop in.
That's what the B stands for, guys. Jorge Booger Edwards.
And not Booger McFarland. My guess is Revenge of the Nerds Booger.
Oh, that's exactly where I was going with it.
There's too many references that I don't believe we're able to stay on here. I guess we can do whatever we want personally.
This is true. We could. The fallout may be something different that we don't want to deal with, but yes, exactly. We could technically.
Fallout, small out. And
kind of to your point, Nate, as you were or Jorge, you said, you see right now there's a whole lot of round 10 through 18, whole lot of IDP sitting there on the board, and you look at our queue up as I'm literally on the board, and I go, oh wow, Devon A. Chain's still sitting out there. Who else we got sitting on there? Kadarius Toney, Gabe Davis, if anybody's still a believer, and we're in the 18th round. So if you're doing IDP and you're worried you're going to miss out on your people that you have in your regular leagues, just hang tight. And if you do, and everybody else starts scooping up and sort of ignores their IDP players because they don't know what to do with them, it's an embarrassment of riches for you at that position, and you're going to be laughing all the way to a championship in December. As I now scramble as to who I'm actually going to pick.
Yeah.
Because we have this weird super flex scoring. I'm just going to take my quarterback in the 18th round. Let's ride.
The Jerry Jeudy-less Russell Wilson. Nothing. I got to tell you, nothing is better than being able to scoop up a person who is in a situation to potentially. All you have to do is get back to. So what was the number last year? If he had just matched his career average in touchdown percentage, he would have been the like QB 13 or something like that. So, I mean, he's far removed from being good last year, but Sean Payton could come in, inject quite a bit to that team, enough to move him up. So yeah, you think you did really good with getting that. I do want to circle back because I heard Kurt say one thing. I want to make sure that we get this out of him. Did you say that you like to go around to different sites and get their information on IDP? Or did you accidentally misspeak and what you meant to say is you're on Fantasy Frames exclusively?
Fantasy Frames, I get my IDP from. It's the sorry, that was old me speaking. Now that I'm fully entrenched, Fantasy Frames is the sole location for all your IDP needs
and Redraft and Dynasty and Best Ball.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. And if you plan on winning,
because basically what I do, I look at the other sites, Nate. And I see, okay, they're doing this, and I look at yours, and I realize how much better yours rankings and your projections are. And I look at the other ones mainly to laugh, to be honest with you.
It does bring a chuckle
out of that. Yeah,
that is a good save. I like that. That's good. Yeah. That's good.
Oh, and you took Nico, and you did clearly see my rankings where I have Nico Collins firmly as a wide receiver 3 this year, comfortably. So great job. Another thing you can do while you are taking Nico Collins and winning your league is you can go to Trophy Smack and you can actually get yourself a nice little belt and or ring, or I would grab mine right now, and you can use the promo code Jorge.
So actually, we have an updated promo code from Trophy Smack. They have this product called Wall Smack, where you basically you don't have to worry about putting nails in your wall or pins or whatever to hang up, whatever. It's all magnetic based. You can create any design you want. You can upload any picture you want, and you could have it hanging on your wall. You can put it on this wall 1 second, that wall the next. Again, it's all magnets. They start at $49. If you use the promo code FRAMES, you get 10% off of your purchase, starting with their smallest one, which is $49. So head over to Trophy Smack today.
Thank you. We have been failing on our total, promotion. Hey, look at that.
There you go.
Across the bottom, promo code FRAMES, 10% off all Wall Smack with the minimum purchase of $49. Carrie and I have a Wall Smack plaque that we had won at the expo from last year, and it is basically saying kickers suck. So we wave that proudly as we substitute them idiots for IDP as I look through the dredge of defensive backs to choose from, which doesn't make my kicker choice. I wish I could pick a kicker right now. I'd have an easier time taking one than choosing one of these garbage players, but I'm gonna go with a spot that is different in that. Oh, where's it at? Sometimes, well, Vontae Davis is not a bad. What I was going to say, guys, and Kurt and Jeremy, as we get deep here, we've always kind of said earlier, you put the Sauce Gardners, the defensive backs, away, and no one pays attention to them because they don't really bring that much value. There are slot corners, i.e. the Kenny Moore, the seconds from 2 years ago, L'Jarius Sneed last year. This year, there's 2. and I'll say it right before your pick, Kurt, so you can use this to your advantage. Nate Hobbs and Taron Johnson are two of the better ones, if that's who you were going to take already. But Nate Hobbs, exclusively in the slot last year, looks to play the same this year, was amongst the leaders in pass rush snaps of safeties or slot position eligibility. Excellent in run stopping. And like you said earlier, the Raiders should be on the field quite a bit, especially against some heavy pass volume teams, because they get the Chargers, the Chiefs.
There's one other important thing you're forgetting about Nate Hobbs, though. Also, Nate,
what's that?
Where do you go to college?
Oh, well, we don't have to.
Actually, where did he go to college? I don't know.
He went to
Illinois.
Yeah.
What
I say earlier, you guys, that safeties and corners from Illinois. The other pick, who was going to be my last pick, but I'll say it anyway. And Sean actually is correct. Desmond King has been definitely one of the more consistent spots there. I don't mean to do this. Sorry about that, fellas. Don't know how to get rid of that on there, but we're just going to let it ride because, well, who cares at this point? Devin Witherspoon with Seattle has really taken a lot of the talk from the beat writers that he could slide into that slot role, a la what Kobe Bryant had last year, and not that Kobe.
May he rest in peace.
May he rest in peace, exactly. Which I will say, at this time last year, someone asked us that question. It was, should I take this person or this person or Kobe Bryant? And I said, well, clearly that's not what you meant. Oh, Rashawn Gary right there. As Jeremy
How do you get sniped by the CPU?
Oh, what a great
in the
pick.
21st round. I'm telling you guys, these are literally the top people in my queue, both rounds. Holy moly. Sorry, go on. You were saying about the Black Mamba, not Black Mamba.
No, but Kobe Bryant, the slot corner for Seattle last year. And yes, may Bray Wyatt rest in peace. The sad story of another wrestler taken too soon. It's crazy, man. Just crazy. I don't know the details of the situation, but
I believe he had a heart attack. That's the latest report I heard. So,
oh man. But let's go back to that, because Rashawn Gary was a great pick there. I mean, dude,
good job, CPU.
Yep. Here, you guys want to watch this? Let's see.
Hey, Nate, one thing I'd recommend when you're talking about for people getting into IDP for the first time, jumping into a draft like this where it's timed can be difficult. The easiest way, get into a long form draft, get into a 4-hour draft, an 8-hour draft.
Yeah.
You got time to think, research, figure it out. You're not rushed. That's truly the easiest way to, and do it a couple times just to get the hang of it and get the feel for it. It's a super easy way to do it.
That's a great point. It really is. I know it's contentious to some. Some people don't like the 4-hour because they hate to have to wait, and heaven forbid. Don't get me wrong. If someone's on the corner taking 8 hours per pick, it sucks. But get in the league with, some of your friends, because there's a good chance that we all just, we'll pick fast. But hey, gotta take a poop. I mean, I might have my phone in. Let's not use that as an example. That's a terrible example. That's what I'm pick the fastest. My pick time is like instantaneous.
Top of your game.
Yeah. So Melissa, let's get you involved. So this was definitely way different than the FF7. First reason why, that was a 14-team Superflex league. This was similar to that in that the ADP was designed to be around like a Superflex, but so many more people taken off the board. When you get to round 6, 7, you start getting into some bad decisions that you don't feel comfortable with. And no, we didn't do kicker, as much as I would love to have had kicker on and keep everybody on their toes and really engaged in conversation. We elected to negate that this time. Next time for you, we will have kickers if you want. But it was definitely different. That every league's a little different. That's what IDP is. The confusing part sometimes. It's there's no continuity. People hate it. Some people love it. But just do like Kurt said, get into a slower one, learn the rules, get comfortable with those. And the more names, what's the biggest reason everybody says they don't want to play IDP? There's too many names to learn, right?
Well, initially I would agree with you that that's kind of like I've memorized all these offensive players. Now I got to go defensive player. For me, I think what I'm noticing with more people is that people do better when you can do a straight comparison with an offensive player.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Voisin Aluakun would be up there with a QB top 5 quarterback, or you have insert linebacker name is more comparable to a Justin Jefferson in terms of like fantasy point production, right? And that's kind of like what we could use to set the barometer for you looking at comparisons. This person's averaging this many points a game. That person's averaging that many points a game. They're both fairly consistent with their scoring. It's not boom or bust. One, that could make for really good trade value between players that you can now feel confident in trading your IDPs in your league. Two, you know what you're looking at during your draft. Again, you're looking at projected point totals. You're looking at where they're falling in their respective ADPs. And you see where the value lies there. Three, if you had any questions regarding which players to pick at which point in your draft, go to fantasyandframes.com, look at our rankings, listen to Shoot the Gap, one of our shows on the Fantasy and Frames podcast.
It's this show.
Season, it's a fantastic show. It's
the show we're doing right now.
It is, exactly.
Yeah, so listen to this again.
Exactly. In season will be live 10 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays, but of course the podcast will drop the very next morning. Or shoot us a DM, on Twitter, or tweet at us, however, at Nate Markham, back-to-back years, top 10 finisher in Fantasy Pros IDP scoring. Reach out to me at Jorge B. Edwards. He's not with us tonight, but we're thinking about you, Hollywood Titan, at Hollywood Titan on Twitter, or X, or whatever the hell they're calling it at Twitter. Why don't they call it Twitter X? We'll just combine the two. I don't know. Anyhow, that notwithstanding, definitely a lot of options there, and we're there to help you. We love IDP. We love talking shop. Most importantly, we love helping you all love IDP and continue to play it.
I don't. I like beating you in leagues. So don't use my rankings. Use the other rankings that Kurt's using, and finish second.
That's why I'm losing.
Maybe that's what it was. You used ours for the first year when you were first overall. Then you switched to the other guys and went down to the other one. And
get rid of that purple stuff. Go back to the Sunny D.
Yeah. Oh,
there you go.
Yeah, Sunny
D.
That's a deep cut.
That's good.
This turned into basically a 1980s flashback. And Twixter, very good, Sean. I like the idea of that. Sean, again,
left or right Twixter? Is it?
I don't know the answer to that exactly. But
the commercials.
I'm familiar. I don't know which side I am, left or right. I don't really.
Both, obviously.
Well,
there you go. Yeah.
Can't eat just one, as they say. Can't drink just one. Can't have just one. Exactly. I don't know if it's a fat joke or not, but I'll take it.
I'll take it. It's good.
That was fun. I want to, one thing, Melissa, you say, oh goodness, that was horrible. I don't think the draft was that horrible for Melissa. I think that, consistently had good spots in you starting off with Jefferson, Devontae Adams is about as good a spot as you can ask for. And if Josh Jacobs returns, you're probably heavily invested in the Raiders. Sorry for that. You and Kurt will be best of friends, but
yeah, Melissa,
you get a potential upside in Kyle Pitts. DJ Moore, we've seen, has the rapport with Justin Fields, Deshaun Watson. So now you're really just hitting every string of reasons why Kurt would like you. And then, like I said, Devin White with the first linebacker. Devin White, Trey Hendrickson, one of my favorites, Antoine Winfield, Dexter Lawrence, Josie Jewell, one of Jorge's favorites, Lucas Van Ness, Alex Singleton, Jair, and Jonathan Owens. That's where at the end I would tell you, if you're looking for some of the defensive backs, Jonathan Owens is intriguing. You just don't know exactly about playing time right now in Green Bay, and Jair at the corner. It's the only two positions that I felt were like just area you could, but like you said, it was so fast. You didn't have time to kind of slow it down just a little bit, which always sucks. That's a really challenging thing. So take Kurt's advice, get into a slow draft like our FF7s where you have a chance to kind of get it going. I wouldn't start one now because some of those might take till beginning of the season, but I don't know.
Maybe a good 4-hour timer draft is out there somewhere, or something along those lines. But no, definitely 100% agree with what you just said, Nate. Kurt, but you said it originally. It helps finding those slower drafts, especially for somebody who's starting out, because it gives you the time to research players and to get advice and to look at rankings and whatnot. So don't let this instance intimidate you or scare you off from playing IDP or put self-doubt in your mind that you can't do this or navigate the IDP waters. You completely can, and we're there to help you along the way, no matter what.
Can I say one last thing? I know I want to keep you all with the reins of the show. You guys are the stars. But if you convince your league to switch to IDP, the beautiful thing is you're as experienced as probably everybody else in that league in IDP. And in fact, you have a leg up because you're listening to this podcast and you know to go to fantasyandframes.com. So don't be scared about changing it and thinking, I'm going to blow it because I drafted the wrong defensive back. Probably everybody else in your league is going to go through the same struggle. And also, it gives you, if you know the rankings and you go to these guys here who are just absolute best and also happen to be wonderful individuals, you're going to be able to find a league winner that everybody talks about, not as an RB2, but as a linebacker 1, and you're going to be laughing all the way to the bank.
It's exactly right. We will have each week that information, hopefully, to give you the edge going forward. And I hope to get you guys back on one of these weeks coming up where we can look back at some of our drafts, how we've done and how it started. Maybe we'll wait till that first Raiders-Chiefs game, and then that way we're all in good moods.
Or not.
Or maybe not. I might be depressed. Who knows? That could be it.
Doubtful.
Doubtful's right. But
stop it. You never know.
Stub your toe on the coffee table about the only reason to be upset.
Exactly. I would be out of commission. I'd be laid up for quite a while, unfortunately. But well, guys, let's wrap up. Obviously, everybody that was listening, thank you. If you want to hear any more, I'm in about 45 minutes gonna be going on Sirius XM channel 87 with our friend Bob Harris. I don't know exactly what we're talking about. I doubt it's IDP. So if it's not, I'll infiltrate. I'll take over the whole show and just drop Sirius XM's ratings by the second as we talk Nate Hobbs and Jalen Phillips.
There you go.
Spread the gospel.
Yep.
Hallelujah. So for Jorge, for Jeremy and Kurt, Nate, we will see you next week.